Did you get a chance to watch Vince McMahon's documentary, Mr. McMahon?
Yes.
Have you seen all 6 episodes? Like you?
Yes, I have.
Okay. First of all, I two friends of mine, Matt and Sheena Sapala, call me and they say, you have to watch this documentary. And I think it's Steve of Etienne calls me and says, you got to watch a documentary. So I'm like, listen, it's 6 of them, 6 hours. I don't know if I'm really going to watch it. So Saturday night, I start, kids are asleep, wife's asleep. I said, I'll watch it on Netflix at 1.5. Mm-hmm. At 10 o'clock, I watched the first episode. I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure I finish all the episodes. I was hooked.
Yeah.
I was hooked. And when I watched it, but when I was done, like, a lot of, well, let me tell you the real thing behind Vince McMahon. He's a bad guy. He's this. I don't know about you, but when I watch it, I mean, you're in it. So you're watching it from a different perspective than I would watch it. The documentary made me like him more. Did you get that feeling as well when you watched the documentary?
Well, I know him very well.
Right.
Very, very, very well. And actually, I worked for his father first. And I worked for his father in New York, oh my gosh, between 78 and 80. And then I got fired by his father for doing the Rocky movie. Because when I told him I was going to do the movie, he goes, well, Terry, my first name, of course, you're a wrestler, not an actor. And you're supposed to, I was in Fall River, Massachusetts, and I wrestled the main event that night and get out of the ring about 11 o'clock, and I got a call from Vince McMahon Sr., said you have to be in Charlotte, North Carolina at noon. So I would have to drive all night to get to Charlotte, North Carolina, because he was lending me to another promoter there. And I was supposed to be on Charlotte TV at noon. I said, Mr. McMahon, I already told you I'm going out to L.A. to film the Rocky movie with Sylvester Stallone. He goes, if you do that, you're fired and you'll never work here again. And I went, okay, fine. So I flew out to L.A. and did the movie. But that's kind of like how this whole thing progressed and moved forward by, going in that direction. But I worked for Vince Sr. first. But then after I was fired for, about 3 years, I went to spent a lot of time in Japan, spent half my career in Japan wrestling over there. And I went to Minnesota and started wrestling in Minnesota. And we started this huge promotion. And we were getting ready to come in and take over the whole East Coast. We bought time on Channel 9 in New York and all up and down the East Coast. And right before I came in with my crew, Vince McMahon, approached me, Vince Jr., who now in the documentary, about me coming back, and he had this master plan. And he goes, I need you to fly to Connecticut, Greenwich, and meet me. I said, no, I'm not flying there. If you want to talk to me, come to Minneapolis. So he flew in.
Who's bigger at this time, fame fame-wise, that people know? Is it more you or Vince? I
had started the Hulkamania thing in Minnesota.
Got it.
And I had crazy momentum. And if you look back on some of my AWA matches in Minnesota and see how the crowd would react when I'd play that Eye of the Tiger music, that don, I'd come out, the place would go crazy. Vince came to me, he goes, I've got this idea. I want to take over the whole world. Not just a regional promotion, which New York promotion was New York, Massachusetts, and part of Pennsylvania. I want to take over everybody's territory and cross all these imaginary lines and go places no one's ever gone before. So I went, but he goes, I need to do it with you. And you saw the documentary. I said, okay. So Vince McMahon stayed in Greenwich, Connecticut, with what I call the Eiffel Tower of the WWE offices. And I went out to all these different places I shouldn't go to, like Kansas City, where Harley Race, this ex-Marine, was the NWA World's Champion. And when I showed up, he tried to burn the ring down at 12 in the afternoon. And then that night when I came to the building, he put a gun to my head. And I went through all these different places between South Africa.
He put a gun to your head. Harley Race.
Harley, yeah. And he told everybody he's going to shoot my knees out. And
why is that? He was worried that you may...
I was the champion from the WWF. But for 17 years, he lived in Kansas City, and there was a whole other organization called the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, and he was the champion there. And the NWA actually had more respect than any other title. And for 17 years, Harley Race had been the champion, and all of a sudden this blonde-haired idiot is on TV going, I'm the real champion from New York. I came into his hometown where he lived and disrespected him.
Was he a tough guy? Was he a gangster? Was he a street guy?
No, he was a street fighter. Plus, he was just a tough old ex-Marine. And I really didn't want any part of that. But, you know, once he threatened me with a gun and stuff, 2 seconds later, he stuck his hand and he goes, I really need a job. And I said, you got one, brother. I shook his hand, and him and I went around and wrestled everywhere after that.
How did that happen? So I got a gun pointing at you.
Yeah. And
2 seconds later, I needed.
Yeah, he just put the gun down. He goes, I really need a job, because we were coming in and taking over.
Now, are you making money at that time or not yet?
Oh, yeah, I was making money.
Are you making $1 million? Are you making a?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you're financially, everyone knows in the market you're making money.
And they knew if they went to where I went, these wrestlers that were making like $1,000 a week, all of a sudden we'd be making 10 or 15 or 20 grand a week.
So let me ask you, are you the one that's going out there and recruiting other talent for Vince?
No, I didn't do that.
Okay,
but I was. We'd pump our signal into like Los Angeles, California for 4 weeks. And once we saturated the marketplace, then I would show up and do a show. You know, we'd pump our signal in Toronto, Canada for 4 or 5 weeks, and I'd come in and sell at the Sky Dome or, you know, Maple Leaf Gardens. So Vince stayed in the office, and I went to these places where nobody was supposed to cross these lines as far as respect goes. And I would have promoters and other wrestlers and everybody else either wanting to beat me up, kill me or something. But
that's crazy.
Sooner or later, we won everybody over. And I was young enough and crazy enough to do that back then.
Was it like, you know how Mr. Olympia, the bodybuilding world, I'm sure you follow Mr. Olympia as well, because it's very similar to Mr. Olympia back in the 70s, 80s, had a little bit of a mob-esque type of a feeling where, hey, you better put this here, you're going to pay me this, and you're going to do this, and you better not go to this guy, and Manny and this, and all these guys were small mobsters, gangsters, maybe not affiliated, but they were tough guys. You just didn't want to mess with them, right? Was there that feeling with how wrestling was in the 80s?
Yes, there was. You know, it was very different. You know, I just remember I went to Botswana, South Africa. I wrestled a guy named Terry Funk, you know, and after the matches, you know, they paid us in cash, a whole bunch of cash, and he was leaving the next day. And as I was in the Mercedes, I had 3 guys in the car. They're clicking their guns and pointing them at me, and they were driving me from Botswana to Cape Town. And as I'm riding in this car, they're pointing the guns at me, screwing around. And, you know, they said, you know, you were really overpaid. You know, you only wrestled like 15 minutes. I said, you know, guys, I really don't need the money here. You know, here, take the money. And I get out of the car. First thing I did was I called the hotel, and I told Terry Funk, don't try to get your money from the casino because you may not make it to Cape Town. So I went home and I told my mother. I called my mom and said, Mom, they robbed me, Mommy. And my mother went to the embassy in Tampa and got my money for me.
Get out of here.
My mother got my money for me.
What year is this? Like mid-'80s or early 80s? This is post-Rocky.
It had to be, no. This was after Rocky.
Right,
because when I went to Botswana, I mean, it was Sun Cities where we wrestled, but they had girls come out with me. So it was after Rocky, and it was before I went back to work for Vince Jr. Yeah, I was during the time in Minnesota.
Wow.
And so I actually called my mother up like a crybaby, and my mother went and got the money for me. So it's just kind of funny.
Now, did she call Vince and say, hey, you better go get this money for my son? Or she called the embassy directly?
No, I wasn't working for Vince at the time.
Okay, got it.
She went somehow or another, the embassy or whatever she did, I really never asked her, but she got the money for me.
Your mom's got a strong personality. If she
did a great job. Well, she's Panamanian, so she's kind of like...
Respect. And I've been to Panama. It's a beautiful place there. So now at this point, you're on the road, you're going. By the way, the difference between Vince McMahon Jr. and Sr., what was their different approach one-on-one with you behind closed doors? Like, was Vince selling the vision, and was the father the tough guy that you feared? What was the difference between the two?
Well, you know, Vince and I have talked, and we've said several times if his father knew what we were up to, he'd roll over in his grave. Because Vince Sr. was very respectful of those relationships. Like, his main attraction at the time was Andre the Giant. And he would send Andre the Giant to Louisiana for a week. And Andre would wrestle all the guys, and then they'd have the big blow-off with the Battle Royal with 30 guys in the ring. And then he'd send Andre to Georgia for a week and do the same thing. Then Minnesota for a week and do the same thing. Because Andre was such an attraction, you just couldn't keep him in New York all the time. So Vince was very respectful. Vince Sr. was very respectful of the relationships of all the promoters and all the small territories around the country. So when Vince Jr. took over, and he came to me, because at the time I was on a crazy roll in Minnesota. I had figured it out. I had the notoriety of the Rocky movie. I'd figured out how to work a crowd, and I really had the art form down at that time, and my timing was impeccable. I had everything lined up, not only media-wise, but in the ring, my timing was good, and I could work with anybody. That, you know, when Vince and I got together and decided to try to take over all the territories and do this global juggernaut theory that we had, if Vince Sr. would have known about it, he would have killed both of us
because of the relationship. Like, hey, you can't get to that territory and take their guys away.
We broke all the handshakes.
So in the mob world, they would call that omerta, right? Like, you know, breaking silence or whatever. And there was a certain code between the 5 families, right? The commission with Lucky running the whole thing.
Right.
Was Vince's father the one where we don't break this code? That family's this, we don't cross the line. And you guys came in and said, forget about it. We're going after everybody.
And to do what we did, if you think back, like when I started in the 70s, you know, and they broke my leg the first day, you couldn't do that to a kid now. You know, you couldn't take some kid and take him to a wrestling school and break his leg. The business has changed, you know. But back then, when we crossed all these imaginary lines and broke all these handshakes, it was a mob mentality that we have to stop these 2 clowns, Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan, from doing this stuff. But we were making so much money and doing so well. All these top stars in Louisiana, like Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Junkyard Dog, and all these other huge stars like Dusty Rhodes.
They're all knocking on the door.
Dusty Rhodes, who I got watching, came up and worked for us. You know, and you know, it was kind of weird for me because I loved Dusty so much. I was the main event in Madison Square Garden. It was hard to watch my idol be like the 2nd or 3rd match on the card. So that was kind of tough for me because I loved him so much. But he has so much respect for the business and for what I'd done, and it was mutual, you know, that we just got along so well.
You're going to think I'm crazy when I tell you this, but the last 13 and a half years, I've been working on my first fiction book to write, ever. Fiction book to write. And while I finished this book, a year ago, I got the strangest phone call about one of the characters in the book where the guy wanted to meet with me, and he read the book, and afterwards is like, wait a minute, am I the villain in the book? This is a story about a character named Asher, who is half Armenian, half Assyrian, whose father was involved in the Iranian Revolution, linked to Savak, working with the Shah, that they escape and he gets recruited to a secret society. When you go to the secret society, it's been around for a couple thousand years. They've developed some of the craziest leaders of all time. And they test you. There's unique tests that they have at this society where they test to see your emotional mental toughness. One of the tests that they have is very rigorous. It's purely mental. Of course, there's a physical one, but one is mental and emotional. If you're Armenian, if you're Syrian, if you're Persian, this is a book you're going to be reading and saying, holy moly, this is the kind of stuff you talk about in here? Yes. If you're somebody that's fascinated by history, this is a book for you. Characters. There's a technology that this society, secret society, builds where you go into a vault. I won't spoil it for you. When you go down, they have a technology where you get to sit down and watch and have a 3-4 hour conversation with Tupac. You can set up a debate between Karl Marx and Ayn Rand. Karl Marx is in the book, who wrote Communist Manifesto. Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged, is in the book. Marilyn Monroe explains the concept of seduction and sex in the book. When you read the book, it's about development of the next leaders in the world and how they do it and how they've been doing it for many years. And it's also about how to prevent the end of civilization and how this organization goes about doing it. So, I've never written a parenting book before, but if I ever wrote a parenting book, this is the closest thing to it because it's all mindset, a lot of crazy stories. Again, 13 and a half years. Trust me, I told myself I will not publish this book until I sell my insurance company and I'm fully disconnected from it, where it's no longer my responsibility 100%. When you read this, if you're a creative person, if you like fiction books, if you enjoyed Atlas Shrugged, or if you enjoy Divergent, if you like books like that, I think you're going to enjoy reading this book. It's the creative side. Business books is very easy. Here's how you do it. Here's how this how it works. This is very creative. If you haven't placed the order yet, now you can order it on Simon & Schuster, Amazon. I'm going to put the link up below somewhere here, maybe even in my profile. Go order the book and read it. I've never written a book where I can't wait to read your reviews to see what you think about this book. So I'm going on this wild journey, and we have some plans with this book here. If you support the things that I work on, I would appreciate you going and reading the book, order the book on Amazon, and then post a review.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.